television highlights of the news of yesteryear.
August 1918, and German generals blame the collapse of the Hindenburg Line and severe French-Flemish front losses on the arrival of fresh American troops. On November 9th, Kaiser Wilhelm abdicates. And 2 days later, a delegation of German civilians signs an armistice of submission. British General Haig and French Consul President Clemenceau inspect German headquarters near Paris as delegates from 27 nations prepare to convene in Paris to draw up a treaty of peace which is to end World War I. German delegates are housed at the Hotel Reservoir with Baron von Lersner, an important member of the group. As Deutschland's representatives and their secretaries make their way to the peace conference, the calendar reads January 18th, 1919. Principal topic of conversation among Allied representatives is United States President Woodrow Wilson's proposed peace without victory, under which the German people would be given a decent national post-war existence. Within the Big Four, England, France, Italy, and the United States, only America backs Wilson, with other leaders such as Poland's Premier Paderewski prepared to hear more about the plan. Wilson, en route to the convention hall, is to succeed in writing into the peace treaty the covenant of a League of Nations. At Versailles, waiting delegates include America's Charles Evans Hughes and England's David Lloyd George. It is June 28, 1919, and today the treaty is to be signed. Prior to the actual signing comes a speech from Lloyd George, whose thoughts on reparations were completely in opposition to President Wilson's. The Big Four, Wilson, Clemenceau, Lloyd George, and Italy's Vittorio Orlando, enter the Hall of Mirrors at Versailles. Inside the hall, delegates sign the document, with Wilson, ill from overwork, hoping that his League of Nations will correct the shortcomings he feels are in the treaty. The actual Treaty of Peace. Signatures and seals are affixed by the Allied nations, and the Big Four leave the hall as the flag of peace flies high above Versailles.
August 15th, 1935, and the world is saddened by the deaths in an airplane crash of two men, Wiley Post and Will Rogers. Rogers, famous humorist and political satirist, and Wiley Post, aviator extraordinary. These pictures were made in Seattle, Washington, last stop before the plane took off for Alaska, where it crashed in a fog 15 miles from Point Barrow. The 36-year-old Wiley Post piloted his plane toward Juneau, Alaska. From Juneau, Post flew to Dawson, Fairbanks, and the next scheduled stop was Point Barrow. But fate and a fog put a tragic finish to the flight. This is the Alaskan terrain that defied even the flying skill of Wiley Post. It was Post who, with his partner Gatty and his ship, the Winnie Mae, had flown successfully around the world and who had survived a previous crash in the Alaskan wastelands. Post followed his round-the-world flight with Gatty by making the same trip solo. Included among his achievements was one of the first stratosphere flights, wearing this helmet. Will Rogers' humor was loved by all America. Here he is with Mrs. Rogers. The cowboy humorist, beloved for his wit and his uncanny talent for debunking pretense, liked only one thing better than flying: making people laugh. America loses two of its loved ones, but both leave behind an inspiring heritage that lives on forever.
1928, and John D. Rockefeller Jr. testifies in investigation of a continental oil scandal. The investigation committee includes Senators Gerald P. Nye, Thomas J. Walsh, John B. Kendrick, and Bryson Cutting. Almost 2 years after resigning as mayor of New York City during an investigation conducted by Samuel Seabury, James J. Walker is still in England with Mrs. Walker in 1934, although he is to return to his native land in October of the following year. Typical Walker remarks are included in a British press interview.
What do you think of President Roosevelt's administration after 1 year in office?
I think President Roosevelt has made marvelous progress in 1 year for the restoration of progress and good times throughout the United States of America.
Well, have you any plans for the immediate future?
Yes, I have, and I don't mind telling you all about them. Mrs. Walker and I are going to climb that hill that you see in front of you. Goodbye, good luck, and God bless you.
General Chiang Kai-shek and his American-educated wife review nationalist troops in March 1927 with a united China the goal as his armies battle those of independent territorial warlords. China, war-torn almost continuously for hundreds of years, is later to fight against communism. But in 1927, it sought only to combine its small empires under one leadership. But before Chiang Kai-shek was placed at the head of a united China, many were to die and whole towns be destroyed. Chief among the nationalist leader's opponents was Marshal Chang Tso-ling, warlord of Manchuria, whose forces battled Chiang Kai-shek and his so-called North Punitive Expedition. With American interests and citizens in China threatened, Chang Tso-ling met with United States officials at the American legation, and as a result of the meeting, 1,560 Marines sailed from San Francisco following the departure of Brigadier General Butler and Colonel Miller. Just as the Marines were to be called out for China 21 years later in 1948. These same scenes were to be duplicated in 48 with new troops and a new commander replacing 1927's Colonel Harold Snyder. Coming events cast their shadow before them as civil war seethed in the Orient.
Miami Beach, Florida in 1922, and the year's first bathing suit review indicated the type of togs that were going to make the waves a little wilder that season. As I remember 1922, things were in terrible shape, and the girls considered leg-bearing quite daring. Back then, there were a lot of girls, and take that any way you like. All I can say is there's an awful lot of bathing suiting, which just about covers the situation. Soirée of Paris in 1922 created a few new afternoon ensembles, not the least of which were these outfits. Take a long look, girls, because the kids back in 1922 had the long-length new look way back then. A soirée masterpiece, matching hat and suit in contrasting black and white. The motif of the suit is carried out in the chapeau, and the ensemble is modeled with a smart set swagger, considered quite the thing in the 20s, when everything, like our friends, went.
It's 1930, and Bobby Jones, Atlanta-born winner of the British Amateur Championship, the British Open, and the American National Open, is gunning for his fourth triumph of the year, the National Amateur Crown. The scene is Interlaken, Minnesota, and no man has ever won all 4 major golf trophies. The Georgia barrister has only to beat Eugene B. Homans to set a new record for amateur golfers. From 1923, when he first won the National Open, Jones has dominated the golfing world, and his victory today climaxes a series of tremendous golfing achievements.
Hip, hip.
Golf Association President Douglas gives Jones his tournament awards.
Here I have to present him with the gold medal for winning the qualifying round first. And then, Mr. Jones, I'd like to give you the medal for so ably winning our championship today, sir.
Bobby Jones, the fairway's fair-haired boy, one of the real greats of golf. Milwaukee, Wisconsin, July 1934, and a 1,500-meter race pits Glenn Cunningham against Gene Venske and Bill Bonthron and others. That's Venske in the lead with Cunningham second as they swing around the first turn. Suddenly, Cunningham turns on the heat and flashes to the fore in one of his famous mid-race sprints. Venske holds second, and Princeton's Bonthron stays on Gene's heels. The pace is fast, and there's no question of either the winner or a new world's record, as every stride of Glenn Cunningham's carries him further in front. But wait a minute, that's Bill Bonthron challenging Cunningham to the tape, and then with a final burst of speed, passing Cunningham to win by 2 feet in the world record time of 3 minutes, 48 and 8/10 seconds.